speaking of doing what things are designed to do, we had yet another instance on Sunday of an attempted assassination against President Trump by one of these libtards, one of these libtard sleeper cells who are being activated by these kind of like anti-Trump ecosystems, which are, of course, propagated by the left, but also propagated by many who claim to be on the right, whether that's because of resentment, sour grapes. They all kind of share this anti-Trump agenda, and they all agree fundamentally with the premise that Donald Trump should not be a part of American politics. What they disagree on is the scale, how extreme that ought to go. If you're like a full libtard, you want Donald Trump to be assassinated. If you're, one of these supposed conservatives, but who ultimately finds himself to be anti-Trump, not just in disagreement with Trump occasionally, not even, wanting to work with Trump were he to correct a certain issue or do whatever, literally just like against Trump and finding whatever reason to plug into that. You have this ascendant class on the right who, of course, is like that. This would be your Marjorie Taylor Greenes, your Thomas Masseys, people like that. They disagree on the scale of that. They might not come out, and say, oh, yeah, we want Trump to be assassinated. Nonetheless, they are contributing to that ecosystem, actually, with the hysteria that they create about the Epstein files, the hysteria they create about Trump betraying us for other countries. They are all participating in that. And we know that they're participating in that, not just because they say things on Twitter.com, but because they do collaborations. They go on the media platforms of the chief puppeteers of this kind of, anti-Trump momentum. So all of these narratives are designed expressly to produce this result, which is you get these libtard sleeper cells who are dysgenic, maladjusted. They want one of these people to go pick up a rifle and waltz into Mar-a-Lago and try to kill the president. They want one of these people to go to a college event and try to kill a conservative speaker. That is what this is all for. That is the point. The purpose of the system is what it does. The result it consistently produces. That is what this is. These people do not care about truth. Obviously, me when I'm so base that I trust the mainstream media to report on the truth. These people do not care about child abuse. Obviously, otherwise they would have been speaking about Epstein and the Epstein files when we were all talking about it 10 years ago, instead of just right now because they want to use it as a weapon against Donald Trump. They would be talking about the human trafficking that actually occurs every day in this country because of illegal aliens bringing children in, pimping out their daughters, their sisters. It is disgusting, and this stuff happens in buildings you drive by on any major freeway in the country. But instead of paying attention to that, we have to think about, spooky James Bond Island with elites. I'm not denying that our elite class are not exactly angels. I am simply saying if people were actually concerned about the things which they are claiming they're concerned about to attack President Trump and justify essentially inciting these assassinations, they're actually concerned about that, you would see a consistency. They'd be talking about all of this stuff, not a single base uncovered. But curiously, they're not, because they're lying, and you're falling for it because you just need a little help. That's all. So anyway, we had this case. It was early Sunday morning, actually. It was about 1:30 a.m., and a guy literally drove into the secure perimeter of, obviously, Mar-a-Lago, President Trump's home in Palm Beach, Florida, and he had a gas can and a shotgun. Guy was identified as a 21-year-old named Austin Tucker. Austin Tucker Martin of North Carolina, and I guess his parents reported him missing earlier on Saturday. It is believed at this time that he purchased the firearm while driving to South Florida, and Trump thankfully was not present at Mar-a-Lago at the time. He'd been at the White House by this point, but according to Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw, Martin was spotted by Secret Service. He was ordered to put down his weapons. He aimed his weapons into a firing position, and he was quickly put down by snipers. You idiot. Me when I die for literally nothing. Me when I get one-shotted by shit I'm reading on Twitter about the Epstein files, and then I take up arms at Mar-a-Lago. Trump's not even there. Secret Service is like, hey, can you not? And then I get one-shotted by that too. Me when I'm destined to be one-shotted because I'm an idiot. This is now the third high-profile assassination attempt on President Trump in just the last, 18 months, 2 years? Family members say Martin was an avowed Trump supporter, Christian conservative, but he had recently complained and become disillusioned about, the economy, and more specifically, he became obsessed with the Epstein files. So this is the betrayal, right? This is what these people want to buy into. This is what is captivating the attention span of these people, this idea that maybe they like Trump, they agree with Trump on certain issues, but he betrayed me. He betrayed me. He stuck a knife in my heart because of the Epstein files. Trump's DOJ arrested Epstein in the first place. The only reason we're talking about Epstein in general as a national conversation is because of the efforts of Donald Trump. Every mention of Donald Trump in the Epstein files is something to the effect of Trump being like, hey, this Epstein guy is kind of a creep. Let's get him out of here. Trump worked with law enforcement to build the case against Epstein. We know all of this, But because people keep seeing Instagram reels and tweets and Facebook posts about the Epstein file, they literally are hypnotized into believing that the ultimate antagonist of this whole saga, if not Jeffrey Epstein, is actually Donald Trump. They feel betrayed, and so they take up arms. So there were text messages from the day after Valentine's Day between this guy and one of his coworkers. He said something like, I don't know if you read up on the Epstein files, but evil is real and unmistakable. The best people like you and I can do is use what little influence we have. Tell other people about what you hear about the Epstein files and what the government is doing. Raise awareness. Again, dude, like, I took so much flack for this over the summer, and I still do, because the story with Epstein is not what people think it is. And I am not saying that because I've made something up in my head. I'm saying that because I have actually read the files. What people perceive the Epstein story to be is, as I said and took flack for over the summer, a sort of Frankenstein amalgamation of many different stories that we've heard throughout the years, whether those be Pizzagate, whether that be adrenochrome, all of these conspiracy theories, which I don't use the word conspiracy theory in the sense that, like, conspiracy, you don't get to, I'm just saying, like, that is like what these literally are. They are theories about people conspiring to abuse children. Let's relax. That is how they view the Epstein story. They view that to be the culmination of all of those stepping stones. Like, we're on our little Junie B. Jones case, and we're like, okay, we had WikiLeaks, and we had Pizzagate, and we had adrenochrome, and now, finally, we're getting closer and closer to the truth, and here we are at the Epstein files. The actual story with Epstein is apparently that this guy was, obviously this billionaire. There's shady stuff with how he got his money, obviously involved in intelligence, had connections. The point being, in terms of the sexual stuff, he was like hiring teenage prostitutes, and they were being recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell. They were going to his property, and they were like massaging these old guys and billionaires, and then quite often that would end in like a sexual context. And then when you have these Epstein survivors come back, and I hate even using the word survivor, dude. Like, what do you, Epstein, like these victims, that's a very Me Too coded word. The Epstein victims would come back years later, and they'd be like, yeah, I started working for this guy when I was like 20, and then I went back when I was like 27, and I got paid. And then now I've decided that I was actually exploited and taken advantage of. And it's like, okay, where are the actual children? You have reports of people who are like teenagers, 16, 17. I don't support that. That's obviously wrong. However, can we acknowledge that that is a different story from what people are saying, which is that children were being like killed and buried and eaten and all of this stuff? Where is the evidence for that? And if you ask where the evidence for that is, people freak out and assume you're part of it. Because again, for them, this is about a mythology. This is just true crime, except now with a political flavor. And so if you're in the business of politics and you would like to maybe, I don't know, have a little bit of evidence, a little bit of substantiation for the fact that you're accusing like Donald Trump of being involved in this, knowing about all of this, hey, can I maybe have some evidence? No, actually, we're just going to assume that you're part of it. It's just like the most retarded conversation I've ever been a part of. But that is like the story. They don't have regard for the details of the story. They don't have regard for why the story would be being discussed right now if we're really supposed to believe that Democrats were sitting on these files for 4 years and then wouldn't actually do anything with it if Trump were really guilty. Now that Trump somehow gets back into office, they're trying to create this problem for him ahead of midterms. And so, yeah, they will pour as much fuel on the fire of the Epstein files as they have to, because they understand there's nothing there. If there were something there, they would have gone after him. There was nothing there with business improprieties, filing documents incorrectly. Nonetheless, they went after him. 34 felony convictions. I don't understand how people can really be caught up in this were it not for just like delusion and hysteria, which, you talk to the average like guy who's really obsessed with this Epstein stuff, that is more or less what you're going to get. Is this kind of, which obviously is why this is the perfect target. The kind of person that would be obsessed with this kind of stuff is, of course, going to be the kind of person who, takes up arms and tries to start like killing people. And so that is like what this is. It's these Epstein obsessed people. And these Epstein obsessed people also that are working in media, working in politics, like getting people killed. That's the point. Thomas Massie, he referred to Trump's White House as the Epstein administration. Fuck you. How about that? How about fuck you? This assailant was likely some like normal young guy who got radicalized by people like Thomas Massie slandering the president. This hysterical, just nonsense being directed at the president because of sour grapes in the political context, because of resentment, because of just this petty nonsense. Thomas Massie said, I've got names. Really? No fooling? Where are the names? Well, no, I didn't mean that exactly. I mean, I got suspicious. What are you doing, dude? What are you doing? Then you had the hockey shooter, like, what, a week ago in Rhode Island? This guy, Robert Dorgan, He was this dude who believed he was a woman. He trooned out. He went by Roberta. He shot up a hockey rink in Rhode Island. He murdered his ex-wife. He murdered his son, injured 3 other people. He had a vendetta against his family, I guess, and he killed himself. And then, okay, now we go explore the Twitter account. Avid support for Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, all the usual retard right black pill grifter accounts. He was obsessed with the Epstein files. He was calling for the formation of a third political party with Massie MTG on the ticket. Do you understand like what is happening here? I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it. I don't understand how better to align one with reality if they still cannot understand what the point of the entire Epstein conversation is. If we can rule out it's clearly not actually about protecting children, clearly not actually about the truth, clearly it is working out exactly as it is intended, which is to cause problems for Trump politically, divide Trump's base, and incite people to take up arms against Trump and his allies. That is what is happening. That is the point of this conversation. That is the point of this entire dialogue. So this guy was supportive of Trump during the election. Now he's calling for a third party. He's supporting detractors because of the Epstein files. That's all what's going on, because you understand sort of the political project of Donald Trump, the mythology surrounding him, which is true, is that Donald Trump is a guy who's going to drain the swamp. He is going to actually align and orient the American political system with American voters. He's going to be the first guy to do this in decades. Literally, setting aside my own biases, how I may personally choose to interpret something in a more optimistic way, objectively, that is the case. Like, just objectively, that is what we have seen. Would I have liked to seen this play out a little bit quicker? Maybe even Trump 1.0, more expeditiously, Trump 2.0? Yes. We are not playing with action figures, though, so I can take what I'm given and I can evaluate it as such and think, okay, this is basically good. So that is what we're seeing. But as a result, because it is such a fragile situation, and because people are obviously quite anxious about the state of their country and aware of the kinds of people we have running it, it is a very destabilizing situation when you start to say, hey, you know that guy who was going to fight for you? Well, turns out we're going to spend all of this time creating this mythology about this thing that we've only started paying attention to 5 seconds ago. And now we're going to say Donald Trump is actually covering for it. Doesn't that make you mad? Doesn't that make you want to do something about it? It's like, so that's the point. That is what all of this is. These people have never cared about protecting children. These people have never once cared about speaking the truth. Literally, the only thing they care about is stopping Trump, be that at the ballot box or be that literally killing him. That is the entire point of this conversation. So if you want to have a conversation about the Epstein files, I would first recommend having like an honest conversation about it and not just like repeating like fear porn memes you see on social media, like actually reading the files and doing so too, please, with like a level of reading comprehension. So when you read a document and it says Donald Trump killed someone and buried him at a property that he didn't even own yet, and then on that same document it says, by the way, this witness is schizophrenic and not credible, you can actually perceive the entire text and then form your interpretation of it instead of just reading the part that's spooky and scary and then ignoring the other part, which actually invalidates the first part. So I'd recommend doing that. But I would also at least just like take a step back and recognize that we are playing the game of politics, not the game of Junie B. Jones. We're all just seeking the truth. And then once we find the truth, we can all come together. These people don't care about truth. They care about narrative. They are spinning a false narrative and telling you that it is the truth, specifically because they want to defang Trump, and they will try literally anything to do that. I do not know how else to put it. I do not know how else to make you see what is so clearly happening.